Thank you, everyone. I feel like I'm a long way away from you today, but I trust you won't mind they wanting to film today. It's a real privilege to be here in the Faroe Islands. I've never been here before. I'm from Australia, which is about as far away on the globe as you can get from the Faroe Islands, but I've very much enjoyed the last couple of days being here and getting to see your beautiful country and meet some of your people. This is a very serious debate that's going on, and I hope you won't mind tonight. This afternoon, I'm going to just speak in the form of a lecture with some prepared notes, but I hope it might help start a conversation. And as Arnie said, it would be great to have some questions. Well, I know that the Faroe Islands is not Denmark, but having been conquered by the Danes, I know that you will have heard of Hans Christian Andersen. His famous story, The Emperor's New Clothes, even made its way around the world to children like me growing up under the hot, blazing sun in Australia. The idea of a deluded emperor parading through the streets of his kingdom, convinced in his own mind that he was dressed in the finery of new royal robes, when in fact he was wearing nothing at all, is a compelling mind picture that lives long in my mind. That an entire people lived in such fear that no one dared to speak out and tell him he was naked is a chilling metaphor for the political correctness which afflicts us today. Andersen was well ahead of his time. If our politicians would have us accept new public policy, it is reasonable for us to expect that it should always be based on the truth. We come to truth through evidence. But in Western countries like Australia and the Faroe Islands, it is unfashionable and even offensive to suggest that the truth exists. Yet despite modern assertions that truth is relative, our political systems retain the residue of the long democratic tradition of Western nations, where parliamentary mechanisms provide opportunities for checks and balances so that new policy ideas can be tested and debated rigorously before they are made into law. Thinking people agree that if something can be demonstrated to be false, it should not find its way into the laws of our land. To pass a lie into the law is to do untold damage to the fabric of a community. An aircraft flying just 1 degree off course will be, by the time the flight ends, so far from its destination, its position will be catastrophic. The truth about the course charted matters. The law does not simply exist to be a big stick to punish those who do wrong. It is also a teacher of what any society holds to be of value. It is a positive statement of what society believes to be for the common good. The law should reflect goodness, beauty, and truth. The rule of law exists to promote human flourishing. This is the ideal for lawmaking in Western countries, where we have a high value of human dignity and community. The Roman governor of Judea, Pontius Pilate, famously asked a condemned first-century Jew, "What is truth?" Pilate was making postmodernism fashionable well before modernity. He willfully ignored the evidence, washed his hands, and sent an innocent man to his death. Despite Pilate's abandonment of the idea that truth existed, Western civilization developed over the next 1,800 years sophisticated and civil ways of testing the truth. This evolved to the point where truth could be tested and justice delivered without resorting to bloodshed. No one suggests finding the truth is easy. We must grapple and strive. Thinking is often hard. But when the rule of law, animated by our quest for evidence-based truth, functions well, societies flourish. When it does not, problems arise. In the current debate that is sweeping a handful of nations about the definition of marriage, people are being asked to set aside demonstrable truth to make way for an innovation in public policy. We are being asked to set aside millennia of wisdom and practice about marriage across cultures and religions to believe that its definition can now be changed in law to accommodate couples of the same sex. Now, it is important for me to state the following. Holding to the timeless definition of marriage is not homophobic, it is not bigoted, it is not hateful. Advocating publicly that the definition of marriage, one woman and one man voluntarily entered into for life, should be preserved in public policy is not an act of animus towards any person or group of people. I have been involved as a public participant in this debate for the best part of 10 years. Despite the slurs bigot, homophobe and hater constantly bandied around about me and my colleagues, particularly but not exclusively on social media, you will find no evidence that I am any of these things. You have to take my word for it that these attitudes don't exist in my heart. I am repulsed by homophobia and bigotry, and I believe it is wrong to hate my fellow man. But slurs and name-calling are now passed off as public debate and allowed to stand by an unthinking media. They are convenient when someone does not wish to engage with arguments. The debate for so-called marriage equality has gathered pace off the back of slogans and emotion, not evidence. Now, there is, of course, a place for slogans in political discourse, but they must have a basis in truth. Government of the people, by the people, was a very effective political slogan used by Abraham Lincoln, but it had a basis in truth. It is worth, then, us unpacking the slogan of marriage equality and equal love. What do these things mean? Up until now, marriage has been based on the idea that men and women are different. Our sexual organs are especially different, and they are physically and biologically complementary. The bodies of a man and woman, when joined together, are orientated toward the production of new human life. The bodies of two men are not biologically orientated in the same way. Neither are the bodies of two women. That is not a statement of prejudice, that is just an objective reality. The only reason governments are interested in the regulating of the love lives of men and women is because the act of sexual intercourse between a man and a woman can result in the creation of new life. Just because older people or people who tragically find themselves infertile cannot have children is not a reason to change the entire definition of marriage. Government, as an expression of the people's desire for the good ordering of society, is rightly interested in how children are socialised. A civil society will agree that it is an act of justice to have law which highly incentivises men and women to stay together for the benefit of their children. Since the sexual revolution of the 1960s, the ideals of marriage have been rapidly eroded from culture and increasingly today by the law. When the Beatles sang "All You Need Is Love," they didn't define what they meant by love. Although if you listen to the music very carefully, it is clear they were talking about an intense emotional experience of love. Feeling is obviously important, but anyone who knows the truth about love knows that it is more than intense feelings. In buying into the lie that commitment and fidelity were not necessary ingredients of love, our society gave into the idea that cohabitation was okay, and this was with disastrous social consequences for children. Academic research commissioned by my organisation and conducted by the University of Sydney showed that couples who cohabitate have a 5 times greater rate of their relationships breaking up. That, of course, has implications for any children who might have been produced during those relationships. The research shows that love plus the promise of commitment and loyalty to one another does matter. Research conducted by the Centre for Social Justice in Britain showed that the quickest way for a child to end up in poverty was for its biological mother and father's relationship to end. In the Western world, we have an epidemic of fatherlessness, and children are the victims. Social science tells us that children do better on every indicator when raised by their married biological parents. Now, this does not mean that single parents or same-sex couples, indeed, can't be good parents. I'm not saying that. But I'm yet to meet a child who is happy about the fact that their mother and father split up. I'm yet to meet a child who is at peace with the idea that they should not be allowed to know who their real biological mother or father is. It is not homosexuals who have damaged marriage in Western civilization. It has been the pursuit by straight couples of the false promises of the sexual revolution that have left a trail of social chaos. Now, smart leaders of the LGBTIQ community recognise this and have cleverly made it a plank in their quest to achieve the redefinition of marriage in law. Britain's Prime Minister David Cameron fell for this. As a Conservative, he said he supported same-sex marriage because of the stabilising impact of marriage. The values of fidelity and monogamy, not normally on display in gay pride festivals such as Sydney's Gay and Lesbian Mardi Gras, are used to promote the idea of same-sex marriage. But let's just think about it for a minute. Under the United Nations Charter, marriage is a compound right to found and form a family. Those advocating for same-sex marriage are not suggesting they want marriage but no children. They know full well that marriage confers the right to have children. But because the sexual union of two people of the same sex cannot produce children, a third and sometimes fourth party is needed. So-called marriage equality is a package deal. For the benefits of marriage equality to be realised, two men must have access to commercial surrogacy and two women must have access to anonymous sperm donation. Commercial surrogacy requires women to rent their wombs and donate their eggs, both highly exploitative practices. Feminists around the world want commercial surrogacy banned. There's a big campaign going on at the moment. I agree with them. They want it banned for gay and straight people, and I think that's right. Surrogacy is not in the best interests of the child, and it certainly is not in the best interests of women. And sperm donation is not in the best interests of children. This is not a gay issue. It is an ethical issue for all of society, and it is not debated widely enough. But if same-sex marriage becomes law, it will be impossible to continue the ethical debate about assisted reproductive technology. Redefining marriage means redefining parenting and abolishing the idea that gender matters in the raising of a child. It gives license for children to be denied the knowledge and love of at least one of their parents. Not because of tragedy or desertion, but simply to satisfy the emotional desires of an adult who is not the parent of that child. Now, where there is a clash of rights or desires in a civil society, the rights of the adult should yield to the rights of the child, of the most vulnerable. That we are prepared to accede to the demands of same-sex marriage ideology, which denies this basic right to the voiceless, is a measure of the selfishness to which our civilization has now stooped. Of course, two men can love a baby. Of course, two women can provide good outcomes in raising a child. But to write this in legislative cement assumes that the Beatles' amorphous definition of love is all that is needed. Yes, love is needed, but love's necessary ingredient is truth. True love cannot coexist with lies. It is a lie to pretend that two men can mother. It is a lie to pretend that two women can father. Only the elites in our society are blind to this and can't see it. When a baby is born, it knows one thing and one thing only, and that is its mother. What society would manufacture public policy that would allow a newborn baby to be taken from the breast of its mother and given to two men? What society would deny a child knowledge of her or his father as if the only value to the life of that child was the capacity of that man to produce sperm? Marriage equality is a package deal, and unless you are prepared to accept that the package is truthful, don't buy the package. Apart from what it asks us to accept about the rights of children, Same-sex marriage ideology is buttressed by a regime of political correctness that few have the courage to challenge. To question marriage equality is to immediately be labelled a bigot. This has been an effective weapon to suppress dissent. Whenever powerful people do not allow freedom of speech, we should always be suspicious about their agenda. In my country, anti-discrimination law is being used at this very moment to silence debate on marriage. The Catholic bishops of Australia have been reported to the government's Anti-Discrimination Commission simply for issuing a pastoral letter which describes Christian teaching on marriage. The Catholic bishops distributed their letter throughout Catholic schools. Children were given the booklet in a sealed envelope to take home to their parents. The bishops were simply describing what the law of Australia says about marriage, and yet the intolerant leader of Australia's marriage equality movement, Rodney Croome, called for them to be reported to the government commissioner, and they were. The bishops will most likely end up in court. This is ongoing at the moment, and it has sent a chill through all churches in Australia who could not believe that we would find ourselves in a situation where churches were being taken to a government commissioner simply for teaching what the church has always believed about marriage for millennia. If under marriage equality a Christian school cannot teach the truth about marriage, where does that leave those of us who will never bow the knee to the state's redefinition of it? We know from experience already in the United States and the United Kingdom that freedoms previously taken for granted are being redefined along with the redefinition of marriage in law. Businesses which supply services to the wedding industry are being fined and closed simply because the owners chose not to violate their conscience in providing services to same-sex weddings. We've seen bakers fined in Oregon over $130,000, a baker in Colorado fined, Ash's Bakery in Northern Ireland. We've seen the fire chief of Atlanta, Kelvin Cochran, a black man, lose his job simply because he wrote a book in his private time explaining the Christian view of sexual morality. The CEO of Mozilla Firefox, Brendan Ike, was hounded from his job simply because he gave $1,000 to the successful referendum campaign to preserve marriage in California. This is just a snapshot of many, many cases in particularly the United States and England where people are being victimised as a result of the redefinition of marriage. Freedom is being redefined along with the redefinition of marriage. It is not in Australia, and again, we haven't legislated same-sex marriage, and we've been involved in a campaign for many, many years to stop it, and we've been effective in delaying it. But that hasn't stopped the LGBT community from pursuing their political agenda. In the state of Victoria in Australia, the government there next year will be introducing a bill into the Victorian Parliament which takes away the freedom of Christian schools to discriminate positively in employing teachers and other staff. It also affects Christian charities or any Christian organisation. It's not bigotry for a Christian school to favour teachers who agree to live by the Christian values of that school. This is simply exercising the precious right of freedom of association and freedom of religion. But the LGBTIQ political agenda cannot live and let live. It will not tolerate dissent, and it is using the law to crush anyone who promotes a different view of marriage through education, through business practice, or even public discussion. We've not discussed what will happen to sex education in schools. Already in our country, even without same-sex marriage legislated, the LGBTIQ community and their lobby has been successful in getting a program into schools in Australia which promotes the idea that if boys think they might be a girl, that they should be allowed to wear a girls' school uniform and be allowed to use the girls' toilets. I kid you not. Girls who think they might be boys are being instructed in how to bind their breasts so that their breasts are suppressed. And boys who think they might be girls are being instructed on how to tuck their penises so that their penises are not visible. I'm sorry to assault you with this, but this is real, this is now. And we have taken this material, I have personally taken this material to very senior parliamentarians in our country who are just as shocked as all of us are at hearing this, but are powerless because no one has the courage to stand up against the LGBTIQ political agenda. Questions about the consequences of marriage equality, including the future of basic freedoms, should be asked now before the Parliament of the Faroe Islands rushes this big change through in February. It is not for me to give you advice, but if I could be so bold to do so anyway, I would suggest slowing down this rush and requesting your local media to begin reporting the other side of the debate. Good democratic decisions are made when there is a contest of ideas, but the LGBTIQ lobby and largely unthinking journalists have been content for this debate to be one-way traffic. In fact, it has thrived on propaganda and the fear that it imposes on dissenters. Why do the activists want the public to remain ignorant about how the rights of children will be trampled? Why do they fear people knowing that free speech rights will be taken away if marriage equality is legislated? People need to know that marriage equality is the tip of the iceberg. This is a radical political ideology that is reshaping marriage, family, freedom of speech, and what it means to actually be a man or a woman. The LGBTIQ political agenda is moving at a rapid pace, and it flourishes because of ignorance and the power it has through the media to demonise and punish anyone who stands in its way. It is currently using the soft power of the media, but the examples I have given demonstrate it relishes using the hard power of the law wherever it can. If it succeeds in changing the law of marriage, expect the hard power of the law to be further deployed against dissenters. This year's Irish referendum was conducted in great haste and in an atmosphere of fear and intimidation of dissent. Ireland capitulated, and while it was carried with a majority of 60%, over 60% support, the low voter turnout meant that just 36% of Irish people actually voted for the change. Not many people know this. In the United States, where more than 30 states had democratically decided to preserve the definition of marriage, 5 of the 9 US Supreme Court judges overruled democracy and decreed that same-sex marriage should be the law of all 50 states. That happened just last June. The Americans had actually won more than 30 ballot initiatives or referenda where the people had the chance to vote. Marriage is supported, despite what the opinion polls tell us. Some 80 million Americans voted in the last 10 years in same-sex marriage referenda with a majority of 60% supporting marriage between a man and a woman. Again, not many people know this. This is why the same-sex lobby fears democracy. It fears the people having a say. Emboldened by the Ireland and the US, activists in Australia made a rush for same-sex marriage this year. They thought they would achieve this by Christmas. Many bills were put into our parliament since May and June of this year. However, after a 6-hour meeting of government MPs last August, it was decided to let this issue be settled by giving the Australian people a vote in a plebiscite or referendum. This will be held after our next election, which is due in about September of next year. That means we've been given the precious gift of time to persuade our fellow countrymen that this is not a good idea, and I believe that they can be persuaded. The LGBTIQ lobby were very angry that our government gave this to the people. They have told us for years that the public support same-sex marriage, but now they fear letting them have a say. This is one of many things that do not add up about this political agenda. I believe the truth always has a way of winning through. Pilate crucified a man who claimed to be the truth, only to discover that the truth was resurrected 3 days later. It is time we started grappling with the claims of the marriage equality political movement. It is time for a conversation And that means respectful coverage of this side of the debate. Marriage equality is not equality for children. It takes away the rights of ordinary people to believe and to live out in public the truth about marriage. We should not allow this political agenda to bypass the normal rigours of scrutiny and fair and open public debate. Its truth claims are in danger of sailing through without being tested in the usual way. No one should simply bow to the emperor's claim that he is wearing new clothes when clearly he is wearing nothing at all. What better opportunity than now for an autonomous country within the Danish kingdom to tell the world the emperor has no clothes? Thank you very much.